Nice.
Welcome to SeerNova Podcast, Season 2, Episode 15. We have Ed Jowett for the
107th time, and that's
we use the word nth, and that just then you don't have to worry about it. You can just say that every single time. Thank you very much for having me back, and hello to everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you for being willing to listen to me ramble away for another however long they'll let me ramble away for.
7 hours. Get ready. No.
I would do that. That's not
Yeah, that's why we choose to do it later in the day, so it at least hits his nap time. So he'll
At least I'm falling asleep.
just keep talking and just like. But yeah, right before we started, we were chatting about plot armored characters, ones that we know won't die. But the whole thing with that is that can make for an uninteresting character. So instead, you mentioned how you might resolve a character who it has no intention of getting killed in the story. And what were your thoughts on that?
So, there are obviously a lot of things you can look at in mainstream comics. You can look at Superman, who, yeah, fine, he died. Okay, I know he died, but let's leave that moment on one side for a minute. Superman, if you want to write him as an interesting character, you look at what, I don't know, the Joker does to the people around him, like gas them all to death or whatever. You look at that, and you look at his relationships with other people. If it's a character like, I don't know, Deadpool, who literally can't die, you can explore how isolating that can be, how far it removes you from being human. One of the things that I'm working on at the moment is called Demon Sword, and it's about a human who picks up a demonic weapon, and she's got this voice from the essence of the demon that used to wield this weapon lives in the sword now and lives in her brain. And it's hilarious. It keeps wanting to get her killed, right? Because it's like, that's the only way I'm going to get free. So let's try and get you killed, shall we?
Watch out behind you. It's like no one's there.
Exactly that. Well, no, more like watch out behind you when you're in the middle of combat and there is someone in front of you, so you turn around and get stabbed in the back because the guy's still in front of you. So you've got this situation where this because effectively it's sort of a superhuman individual, and she feels herself becoming less human, less able to process human emotion as she becomes more and more super. It's not exactly a superhero comic. I suppose it's technically a post-apocalyptic comic, but
maybe like fantasy. Maybe that would be the.
It's sort of an angel demon war that takes place in the modern world and sort of destroyed all of humanity and
or supernatural. Not fantasy. Supernatural is the word I was looking for. Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of it's kind of inspired by Darksiders and Hellboy.
Nice.
But more the Darksiders than the Hellboy, as in, the apocalypse did happen when the angels and demons started kicking the crap out of each other.
Yeah.
But again, someone who you have no intention of killing, because obviously the joke ends when she gets killed because of the sword, and I don't want the joke to end. So the way that you deal with that is you start delivering, okay, well, what is it like to gradually not be feeling emotions anymore? Like, you should be feeling scared or happy or angry or sad or whatever, and suddenly you're not. Everything is just grey. Everything is vanilla.
Muted. Yeah, it's like it's exactly. Very stifling.
And you watch a a family who lost one of their family members and left them behind, had to run away from the demons who were chomping down. And then, they go back and bury that family member, which is a surprise to our main character because she is just gradually moving further and further away from humanity. We were talking about Martian Manhunter briefly. Very, very much the reverse journey for him. It's the journey of understanding humanity better because he's obviously lost his people.
I was gonna say, if anything, he went through the whole process of being, dehumanized. I know he's an alien, but like becoming completely disconnected because he lost everything. To going, wait, there's more to the people that are around me. Yeah,
exactly, and Superman refers to Martian Manhunter as the strongest being on the planet. So, it's that here's someone who is not going to die. Realistically, not happening. So there are a lot of things that you can do with that to make sure that you're still telling interesting stories. At the end of the day, I guess the question that you need to ask and answer for yourself and for your readers is, what is an interesting story? Is an interesting story when someone with the uber superpowers comes in and beats up the slightly less powerful supervillain? Not very often. It gets very boring very quick.
Captain Marvel.
I mean, Lex Luthor is a brilliant example of this. If it actually came to blows, he does not win. He dies very quickly if it was to actually come to blows. But we've got the imposed goodness of Superman that he's not going to do that. His life would be a lot easier if he just killed Lex Luthor the first time he met him.
Yeah, I was going to say, this can get strung out so much that literally the whole plot of like the Dark Knight series is Superman realizing he can't live with his choices, so he gives himself up to the government to wield them as a weapon. So it's the people's will and not his. And then you see how corruption that can get, because now you've outsourced it to somebody. You can get really interesting with it.
Yeah. So the point is to think about what tells a good story, and the answer is always people. People are the interesting stories, and that brings me quite nicely to Cascade. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on your podcast before. I'm a project manager in real life in software delivery.
Yeah, you did. Probably the first time of many that you were.
Probably, ages ago. So, any new listeners, that's it. And as a result, I work with a lot of people. I work with a lot of teams, some of whom work well together from minute one, and most of whom do not. There's a long-standing thing in team building: forming, norming, storming, norming, and performing. I'm very sorry. I wanted to really where Cascade Part 1 came from was the first Marvel Avengers movie, right? The one with Loki and the Chitauri and all the rest. Because I thought, okay, well, what would I do? How would I build up to that moment? And I thought to myself, so this can't be the first comic I write. If there's one thing I did learn from the Marvel movies that the DC movies did not learn, it is you have to care about the characters before they have only a portion of the screen time, because otherwise you're going to get annoyed, right? Someone who's a Captain America fan who only watched the Avengers movie would probably be annoyed, because it's like, well, I don't quite like this. You're dealing with that. I don't quite like this this portrayal of Cap. I'd rather have something else. And then also he only has like 10% of the screen time, so that's really annoying.
I just
not liking that movie in a way that someone who's got used to this portrayal of Cap through watching, in this example, the first Avenger, will kind of be used to the way that Chris Evans is playing the character. But any Hulk fans who watched the Avengers movie because they wanted to see the Hulk would be valid in saying, I really think I got done dirty here. I was interested in seeing the Hulk, and I think I got done dirty here. So
Age of Ultron, you got a good. I was gonna say Age of Ultron, though. You got a nice, He
definitely got a lot more to do.
The thing I was just thinking about too, by the way, I just realized this is another one of those things where it's like a this or that. I feel like if you want to build a universe, you have to really focus on one character, like a Captain America and Iron Man, and then merge them together. But then it made me think of, I watched a whole video on this recently, how there are characters who are beloved who had excessively low screen time, but almost all of them are very small series or individual movies. And a great example would be like Beetlejuice. Like the first Beetlejuice, he has like a few minutes on the entire screen and people loved him. And so like that was something where if you have a one-off thing, you can have that super interesting character who's only there very briefly, like a Boba Fett. You know, he was another example of somebody that people became beloved around him, even though he has a small 6-minute window or something like that he's seen.
I think Deadpool is another really good example, because before the Deadpool movie, there was that trailer they made, like the proof of concept trailer.
Yeah.
And that's what made a lot of people fall in love with the idea of having the movie, and I'm sure ultimately that is what meant the movie happened. The trailer that they did was short. It was enough to get you interested and not enough to tell you anything, because at some point you are going to overcommit on your character and you're going to say something that a portion of fans don't like, right? You lose that portion of fans. Maybe you get new ones, maybe you don't. But what happens is, as your character develops and people learn more about them, there are more things for them to not like about that character. Right?
Just as much as there's more things for like fan lovers to like hold on to.
Absolutely. So I think in some ways you have an advantage making a character who almost never shows up, because then all you have to do is make a big bang, big splash. Beetlejuice being a very good example. If you make a really big splash of Boba Fett, really big splash, something.
Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
But seriously,
literally
minutes of screen time. I mean, I can probably count them on 2 hands.
Yeah.
Across all of the Ghostbuster movies so far, right?
Yeah.
I've not seen the Frozen Kingdom.
I just thought of Slimer, the green blob. Like he's only got a couple seconds of screen time.
Right. Although he did get a lot more screen time thanks to the cartoon series.
Yeah.
Because he was a regular character in that. So anyone who grew up in the 90s where the cartoon series were really big.
I think that's because of the fandom built from the first movie, this small section of this gross green slime coming through. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like kind of like how Boba Fett, now we have, what's it called? The Mandalorian. It's like they created it after there's this fandom. I know that's way longer apart from each other, but the whole reason it exists is because of that 6-second window of Boba Fett. And then they're like, why don't we make a whole series about the Mandalorians? And then eventually it was like, no, we really want Boba Fett. So they make Boba Fett. Like, so I almost wonder, that's interesting. I love that. Cause like I mentioned before, the idea, or before we started today, the whole thing about starting with, without the origins or with them. And it's like, it works either way, but you have to plan it ahead of time of how it's going to work. And you can't just force something to be exciting. Like it has to be exciting. It has to be exciting.
And I think one of the things that a lot of indie creators don't do, a step they skip, is actually finding out from people what they do that makes their comics good in the eyes of their readers. What is it that you guys do or I do that means that my readers keep coming back? And I think that a lot of indie writers just skip that step. They go, oh no, I know what's good. I know what I do that's good. It's something that's very dangerous once you get a few comics in, as we all are. Once you get a few comics in, you can get very certain that what you're doing is the thing that people like. It's especially hard in the indie space. I mean, if you're a writer for Batman, there is data for years, decades, about what makes the character, nearly a century, about what makes the character popular and what the trends are and what's worked and what hasn't and so on.
And what you can lean on as like a given, like things that are just assumed.
Right. You make Bane show up and people will at least be vaguely interested.
Yeah.
You're likely to have, if they're likely to give it a chance. Whereas, I don't know, maybe if Mr. Freeze turns up, people are too turned off by the Arnie portrayal in Man and Robin.
I would love to see Arnold Schwarzenegger do it again. I don't know. I love that cheesy stuff.
I personally enjoy it for its entertainment value, and I think that people get a bit. If you're gonna go after a Batman movie, if you're gonna go after Batman and Robin, you've got to also go after Batman Forever.
Yeah.
You have to also go after that movie because they are tonally very similar.
Oh yeah, they're yeah.
It's just Batman is a bit less silly in Batman Forever, and you've got Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones being ridiculous. Which is,
by the way, I put a question.
It can be entertaining, right? That's not a negative. Like it's funny. I was talking about the A-Team movie, the one with Liam Neeson, and the sort of the soft reboot prequel thingamabob. I watched it the other day. I hadn't actually seen it, but I've read the reviews over the years. I'd never actually seen it. I watched it. Do you know what? It was entertaining, right? That's all I wanted. I wanted to sit down and watch a movie with my wife that was entertaining. So that's what I did.
That's like all the Transformers, the what's it called, the Fast and the Furious, like
right.
People
entertaining.
People that criticize it and yet it makes tons of money don't realize that the people watching it aren't trying to get this super realistic version.
I don't need an art film today, right?
Yeah.
That can be another day. Like, don't get me wrong, I like the occasional film that makes you think. There's no problem, but occasionally I like The Hitman's Bodyguard or The A-Team or just Fast and Furious, something dumb that makes no sense whatsoever and I don't care today. Like, that's the mood I'm in. And then other days I'll watch The Lobster or Ghost Dog Way of the Samurai or whatever that's trying to make me think about things.
Which, by the way, so we mentioned earlier, I wanted to bring up before we get too far from it was a question I put in the private chat, which was we were talking about the stories and how indie comic creators might not realize what they need to do in order to capture their audience's attention because they have something in their head that maybe is not getting portrayed properly. So it was a question I had pop up here, which was, for independent comics, do you think that the majority of the ones that fail because of bad crowdfunding, meaning they don't get money, bad marketing, meaning they don't get recognition, or bad stories, which is why the other two almost are irrelevant, if that's the case? Or is it a combination of the three, two of them, all of them? What are your thoughts on what's the thing that's most holding independent comic creators from elevating into the ethos of the mainstream?
I'm going to give you the most Ed answer you've had in a while. It progresses between them. So you first start as an indie creator, you probably screw up your crowdfunding. You probably do, right? But marketing is a lot less relevant at that point. Like it'll be your crowdfunding strategy that means that you don't take off the way you might have hoped, right? You'll make a stupid mistake. My first crowdfunding project, which was some years ago now, I set my goal way too high. I didn't make it. I failed. I got a decent amount of money, but I totally failed. Everybody does it. Everybody does it because nobody understands crowdfunding when they do it the first time. They don't understand why it is that they failed because everyone else managed 10 grand, 20 grand, whatever your number is. Everyone else managed that, so I should be able to. It makes no difference. I've never heard of this person. They got it, so it must be the same for me because no one's ever heard of me either. And then you get a rather rude awakening. So you start by having a really bad crowdfunding strategy. You then probably do not manage to make the sales that you want to from your book to fund the next book. So you end up back on crowdfunding. Maybe you've learned new things. Maybe you're doing better. But still, you're then not marketing outside of, let's say, Kickstarter. You're not marketing outside of that because Kickstarter is your safe place. It's the thing you know. You've forgotten, after a couple of years and running several Kickstarters, you've forgotten what the first one felt like. So you're like, no, this is my safe place. It's all good. I can do it. subconsciously, of course, you're not consciously thinking this, but you're going, no, you know what? I know I can get $3,000 off Kickstarter, so I'm going to run my $3,000 Kickstarter because at least that's not nothing, right?
Like the comfort zone, yeah.
All of the effort goes into the thing that you know, the crowdfunding strategy, which means you are not doing any marketing outside of your crowdfunding strategy to grow your audience in the broader sense. Maybe you do the odd convention, but ultimately they don't usually pay for themselves for most exhibitors. Most people struggle to really bring in the numbers that it costs to be at certainly a large convention. It's very hard to bring in the numbers for the costs. So, you know, you're not an expert in marketing, just like 3 years ago you were not an expert in crowdfunding. You probably even at this stage you wouldn't call yourself an expert in crowdfunding, but you know, you're good enough to have a solid support.
Again, it's like
marketing skills, so you have bad marketing, right? So you're not growing your audience beyond the people who would back you on Kickstarter. Again, for example, you're not growing your audience beyond that, so you're not doing the marketing. Then, in the event that you start getting that sorted out, my experience is most people end up writing bad stories at that point, right? Because they've become complacent. They know that it's working. Everyone will buy whatever they write, so why bother working hard? I can now churn out a comic every month. It doesn't need to be good because people will just buy it. I'm getting $3,000 a month every month. It's not a problem for me. Cool, awesome. I'm just going to do stuff. And no longer are you spending the 2 years that you spent perfecting your first comic, because why bother? Because people are buying it no matter what you do. So you start moving into the bad stories thing, which shoots you in the foot, and you end up falling down. And frankly, most people do not get that far.
So people suck at crowdfunding at first and they get trapped there. That might be one thing that kills off independent comics. If they get past that and they start marketing, and now they're getting recurring revenue that's a little more reliable, they might not continue to put out great stories. I was trying to think about this. It's almost like they fall prey to what Marvel and DC eventually fell prey to, but they were expanding so rapidly and never stopped.
They have more writers and new writers coming in, people who love the characters. Yeah. Space to make a new character. But something that indie people, you know, you two and myself, both are prone to is, right, well, I've got these ideas and this is easy. Right? Because it's easy to do it. Right, and where it's easy, well, I mean easier, right? Yep. I don't need to spend 2 years developing a really new rock solid character. I've got a character that I've done 3 comics for. It's solid, it's good. I know it's going to work. I know that this is going to sell. I'm going to do the easy, safe thing. I'm not going to push the boundaries, which is really what drew people to you in the first place and made you go, right, actually, that's interesting. I've not seen anyone try that. You end up producing more of the same of what you're doing. And while it can be entertaining, it's not likely to draw people away from other entertaining comics, particularly entertaining comics with an enormous marketing budget like Marvel and DC, which you and I will never compete with no matter what happens, pretty much. I know that sounds defeatist, but pretty much no matter what happens, we're not going to compete.
I would say that the way to think about that too is like Marvel and DC are companies. If you're an independent comic book publisher, meaning that you publish your own comics and that's it, it's unlikely that you could compete with a company that had thousands of IPs created when you've got 5. And the way to think about that, it's like you might get one of your IPs to outsell a Batman comic eventually, right? That might happen. But it's unlikely.
1 month, yeah.
But it's unlikely that you are going to sell as much as Marvel and DC unless you're building a comic book publishing company, not just publishing or self-publishing, or self-publishing under an LLC of your own name,
That's the thing, isn't it? What DC and Marvel did is they let creators come together or enabled it in some way that I'm not going to lie, I do not fully understand. They enabled creators to come together and make their own characters within the universes, and the ones that were cohesive were the ones that stayed. So, you know, your Doctor Stranges and your Spider-Man, obviously, and so on, you know, they glommed onto the Fantastic Four and this growing universe, even though it was the same sort of core group of people, different people threw in different things. And then you get, I'm so bad at this. The guy who created Deadpool is just a
Rob
good
Liefeld.
example.
Robin. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm just horrible with names. It's a good thing your names are on the screen, because otherwise...
You're like Steve. No,
because I think you got people who are willing to come in who grew up on some of the earlier comics, enjoyed them, but then wanted to do their own set of heroes. You got the New Warriors, or you got the the New Mutants, or you got whatever X-Force and so on. You got people coming in, playing within this universe and the rules that have been set down, who were not the original group of people who created the rules of the universe.
That also made me think of another thing that might hold some independent creators back, which is because they saw the success of the films of the MCU, right? And how they were like, let's make 18 different stories and then merge them all together into this. I also wonder if some indie creators, and maybe honestly, maybe even we fall into that category, are basically building these expansive universes without thinking about telling a really good story. Like don't worry too much about building all of this other stuff if it's at the detriment of a great story.
A brilliant example of this in a movie is the Mummy movie, which Tom Cruise was in.
Oh, is that yeah? I actually just saw that it existed recently.
Wanted to make the whole
they were so desperate to make
monsters.
Monsterverse. Yeah. They were so desperate to make their Monsterverse. They took something that was a good idea, and then it fell apart. Like it was a decent setup. It was decently acted because Tom Cruise is a good actor. No matter how else you feel about other things in his life, he is. You've got Russell Crowe. Sure, we'll run with that. You've got Russell Crowe, who gives a good performance. You've got various others, and you've got the makings of a good movie in there, and they threw away the ending for the Monsterverse.
I was just about to say,
it fell apart because of that choice. The Monsterverse never happened basically because of that choice they made.
So I was trying to remember if I saw it, and based on how you just described that, I think I did, because there's another movie I watched after. I don't even remember the name because of that exact reason, where it was like this great story the whole way, and then the ending just crapped the bucket, and you're like, what the hell was that? Like, you had this perfect setup. Like, you could tell that whoever was writing this knew that was a setup. There's no way, like, that if the common viewer could look at this and go, I know where this is going, and then they just right into a guardrail, and you're like, wait, what? Like, there's a clear path right here. Take the exit. You're good. Just like, what are you thinking? Don't crash into the median. Like, so I feel like there's a lot of even, yeah, you're right, and even in the Hollywood level of they're trying to build this cinematic universe. Yeah. Crushing the story because of it.
I definitely think that a lot of comic creators that I've spoken to fall into that trap. But it's like you say, Dylan, it's the way that you get around that is to make sure that every single story you tell is a good story first. And second, if it builds towards your universe, awesome. If it doesn't build towards your universe, fine. It doesn't matter. Like, if it doesn't directly put building blocks on your universe, that's fine. Right? What you need to aim for is a good story first. Get that right. Get that to be the thing that you are known for. And you know what? If you get known for writing good stories, people will give you a chance to write a good story, or a good set of stories, or a universe of stories. A really good example of this, again in Hollywood, is James Gunn. Right? Yeah. This guy wrote some good stories that worked for the audiences, personally, I did not like the Suicide Squad very much, but I could tell they were trying to write. He was trying to write a good story, right? It didn't work for me super well, but he was trying to write a good story. And from that came Peacemaker, right? So my brother behaved like I might never have heard of it and was like, you should watch Peacemaker. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like as if I hadn't considered it in the past. But you know, that came from writing good stories. And the Suicide Squad came from Guardians of the Galaxy and his various other projects. But at that point, DC look around for someone and go, right, well, this guy writes good stories.
I was just about to say, it's like by having singular good stories, your audience will also allow you to make mistakes on trying to attempt.
Russo being a very good example of this, because I think that Civil War was absolutely chock full of mistakes. They got away with it because of Winter Soldier. There's no question in my mind.
Yes. Yeah.
And somehow a bad movie. I'm gonna say it. It was a bad movie. It wasn't the worst movie I've ever seen, but there's a lot better. A bad movie catapulted them into, by the way, you're in charge of the MCU now.
Yeah.
Because they had made a good movie. They had proven that they can, right?
Honestly, that was probably the success of the overall MCU up to Endgame, is there was hit and miss movies, but because there were so many great ones in between,
there were enough good ones that kept it going.
Yeah, I'm like, it's all right, but like, what was the ending? Cool. That next thing, I'm waiting for that next thing. That's fine. Like, ooh, that one nailed it. What's the next one? That was all right. And yeah, just on and off. But as long as like
that's where Marvel, in my opinion, made the mistake, because they started producing a ton of TV series with moderate to low quality. Like none of them were so outstanding that no one could stop talking about them.
Like honestly, it was funny. The what was it? Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, all of those. Like I really enjoyed watching those, and it's because even though they might not have been as high budget as the Hollywood films, they were. First off, they don't need to be, because they're not like super excessive superpowers, laser beams and stuff. It's controllable. It built this little world in the universe too. Like I think that's the other thing, is like if you want to build a whole universe, there's plenty of like universes that have been built off this side character over here, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, right? Like you can always like have your little universe or have your one-off story that branches off into these solo series. And I think that, again, people who invest too much in building a whole universe, like the DC Justice League, you jump the shark.
Yeah, you just jump ahead. You go, I don't need to do any of this. I don't need to write any good stories. It's Batman. Everyone's gonna want to see it.
Yeah.
And obviously Justice League is still, it's Batman. Batman v Superman was very much, it's Batman. Everyone will watch this. It doesn't matter if it's any good or not. I don't care.
Yeah.
And I think that the key to avoiding that problem always is going to lie in, don't get cocky, deliver a good story. I think if you deliver a good story, Buffy and Angel is actually a brilliant example of this. Joss Whedon's later career, bear in mind, Firefly was a flop, right? It was a good story, but it was a flop. Like it did not.
Poor marketing. It's a good example of the poor marketing, like where like they didn't know they had this super fan audience they could have pulled on, and instead they just let it crash.
Yeah, they just let it crash and burn, and it's good story first.
And honestly, they got the chance to make the movie later too because of that. Like because it was so good, even though it crashed, it was still recognized later to the point where people demanded a film from it. Like they're like, "Where the hell's the ending?"
And there is no doubt in my mind that contributed to his involvement in the MCU.
Yeah,
There's no doubt in my mind. Now, I don't have any proof for that, but there's no doubt. So, in answer to your question, circling back, I think it's all of them, but it depends where you are in the timeline.
Yeah.
And I think that anyone considering running a crowdfunding, if you want to avoid that problem, go and look at the projects that failed. Look for the ones, not the ones that, you load up your Kickstarter page, they're all at the top, they're all funded in 10 grand, whatever.
Yeah,
forever, going back in comics. Scroll all the way to the bottom, as far as it'll let you scroll. Go to the 100th page, all the way down. Find the ones that asked for 5 grand and didn't make it, and figure out what they did or what they did not do. And also, don't assume that you know everything about the industry, because you don't. You've never heard of these people who are moderately successful. Remember that 5 grand for a comic is a very small amount of money in the grand scheme of things. And while we might be able to, very happily make 5 grand, it's a very small amount of money. You do not need a big fan base. You need what? Maybe 1,000 people to buy your comic for $5 to get 5 grand. It's not a lot of people. Don't get me wrong. It's really hard to get that many people to engage and crowdfund your comic. I'm not pretending otherwise. But it's not that many people in the grand scheme of things, bearing in mind, 8 billion people on the planet.
It's kind of like, here's all the people. Yeah, it's like, here's all the people, here's all the football players, or people that can play football. Here's all the actual football players, and then here's the NFL. It's like, like this idea that you might be in the comic space, but like, and that alone is hard. Like, being the football player is hard. But you're still
saying this is easy and you suck for not, in no way am I saying that to anybody listening, and certainly not you guys. I'm saying, you got to remember that we are small until we are selling many millions of copies, right? Until
at least
we are very small.
Or at least 5-6 figures worth of copies, not in dollars, but in quantity. Like, getting to the point where if you get 10,000 sales on a comic and you're an independent creator, that is impressive.
Oh, that's very impressive for an independent creator. But in terms of the actual share of the market, it's still tiny. It's literally nothing compared to what the market that exists.
I think you inspired me to do something. First off, I might even make this a panel on our virtual expo. But I think I might even have a blog. I might create a blog on our site where I go and look for some of the failed, what's it called? Campaigns on Kickstarter. Get a list of them, like 10 of them, and kind of break down why we think they failed, and look into like the creators. Did they have successful ones after? Did they give up after? Did they succeed after? If so, what was the difference between when they succeeded and when they didn't? Because I know for us, it was easy. I remember telling Greg when we first started, we need a following of at least like 1,000 people before we're going to make any money. And we have a blog. I think it's got to get rewritten onto our new website, but we have a blog article that literally is like, do you have 1,000 followers? Stop reading this article, go get 1,000 followers, come back and read this when you want to run your campaign, because however many people know you exist, it's only a small percentage of them that are going to give you cash for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's something like I remember reading an article once that said basically, however many people you have, about 4% of them will go and look at your project, and of those, about 1% of them will actually give you money. So if you've only got 1,000 followers, you might get 40 people.
Yeah.
Right. That's fine. You'll get some money out of that. I mean, not loads, but yeah,
but like, that's a key thing. It's like, there's so many different things to consider of why it could fail. Sometimes it's like simple stuff like Kickstarter will tell you that 80% of successful crowdfunding campaigns have videos. Not all of them. 20% of those successful ones do not have videos. So like, that's not a guarantee, but like, you're a new creator and you have a small story and no video. Like,
that's the deck in your favor as best you can. you stack the deck in your favor.
Yeah. And so I think that I might make that a panel on our virtual expo of like diving into not how to just make a successful crowdfunding campaign, but like how to avoid making a failure of a campaign. It's like how to avoid, dive bombing a campaign because you didn't do X or you did do Y and you should have done Z. And it's like, yeah, I think that's a pretty good one.
I know what we did wrong for our last one, so.
It's fun. Yeah. But I do like that. The idea of like if you want to basically make it as an independent comic creator, it's a good thing to learn Kickstarter because first, I think it's like 60% of all or 60% of all of the comic book Kickstarter campaigns that are run on Kickstarter are successful, which is the highest success of any category run on Kickstarter. And I think they're like the 6th most funded type of project on Kickstarter financially. So it is a very good place to get an initial funding for comics. It's a good place to get like to make money if you're good at creating like different merchandise and memorabilia or like very like collectibles, things like that. It's a great place to get exposed to a new audience because Kickstarter itself already has an audience. But if you don't, and you could also do that forever. But if you don't also simultaneously start marketing yourself externally and growing a fan base, or even getting the people that found you on Kickstarter and cultivating a fan base, that you're going to stagnate. You're going to either, and it's one of those, if you're not growing, you're dying. So it might even appear like you've stagnated, but in all reality, you're going down compared to all the other people that are coming up. So it's like, it's definitely a big deal. Like, get into the crowdfunding for the funding purposes, getting exposed to a new audience, but learn your marketing. And from all that, don't forget about your storytelling. Like, don't lose sight of that as you gain any level of success. If anything, maybe double down on the storytelling, learn more. Like, one of the things that we're doing with, I mentioned this, that I might get brought up during here, is our latest Kickstarter that we ended up deciding to take that comic and start a whole new series with that issue being issue 1 instead of issue 3 of the series that we're cutting off. And from that, we basically, what was I bringing that up for? The crowdfunding. Oh, the storytelling. What we're doing with that now is we're actually trying to measure that against the 7 plot types, right? There's 7 plot types of any story. And then there's like 2 different types of stories from those. So like 14 total types of stories you could tell. And now that you have that bucket, it's like, okay, what does it line up with? Okay, are we actually finishing these arcs? Does it feel like a completed story? And it's like, okay, this one does. All right, well, we want this to be a 3-part series or a 6-part series. What overarching, story arc can we actually make sure to accomplish during this to make sure we don't lose sight of that while we continue the next stories, so that it can actually feel like a completed story as well as part of a larger story. And as we're growing and expanding and getting a larger audience and getting more funding on Kickstarter, we're trying to still double down and tell even better stories along the way. And I would probably recommend that as you gain success, and you do have to learn marketing. If you don't grow your fan base, it doesn't matter how good you're telling stories, you're going to be draining that bank account. And so instead, it's like, get good at marketing and then double down on storytelling.
Absolutely. Never stop learning to tell better stories. Never allow yourself. I mean, again, we're picking on Marvel quite a lot today. Let's do some more. The Marvel formula. I remember the first person who actually complained at me about it, who was not a writer. It was Black Panther they complained about. It was like, again, writing an evil version of them again. And it's like, yeah, they've been doing that for a little while, actually, buddy. Sorry about this, but Winter Soldier is an evil version of Captain America. Yeah,
that's the thing. It's like a lot of the stuff Marvel does.
Movie, it's and then the second Iron Man movie.
I was going to say the second one. Honestly, like that's
and yeah.
There's nothing wrong with doing that. It's more like, because like that is one of the types of stories, is like facing the inner demon, like personified into another person.
There's nothing wrong with doing that story at all. but don't fall into the place where you're just going, this is the only story I'm ever going to tell, and that's fine. Because it's not going to be fine long term. If you drew your audience in, and as an indie comic, you almost certainly drew your audience in by being the first person to do something that they have not seen before. If all you ever do is that thing forever, you will not maintain your fan base, because your fan base is looking for you to do new things.
And the funny thing too is what we decided to do with our new story arc, and this is the other thing. It's like, as you build your universe, you could have one story arc that's running through all of them, but it's this idea that there should also be ebbs and flows, because every person doesn't go through the same story themselves over and over again. So it's like, of those 7 plot arcs, you could literally go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then start over, and you'll like. Think about it. If you made 14 comics, you'd only copy them twice. And that's a type of story, not like the story. So it's like...
Actually, you know what would be a really interesting story? Every character going through exactly the same situation.
Yeah. And like, that's the thing. It's like, by having... So like, one of the things that we're doing with this story now is we aligned it so that the main character is going through this story arc, but we also make sure our villain has a story arc. Like, cool. That's it's like making sure. Yeah, because like some people, they just have one result of that, and like that's how you kind of build out the universe too. Is like the Game of Thrones, the Lord of the Rings, like
the stuff that happens off screen, right? The way that you develop a story is not by going, here's what you can see. Boba Fett. Boba Fett's story was developed in a novel, which practically no one ever read. Again, relatively speaking, people saw him on screen. I read the novel, and the Tales of the Bounty Hunters. It became canon later, like proper canon later. That's what happened. It's one of those things where you go, right, but the things that happened over there that I didn't show you still happened. And they affected Han Solo when you meet him for the first time. Oh yeah, you're that guy who did the Kessel Run. Okay, cool. I don't know what that means. I'm a 5-year-old watching that movie, and I'm going, I don't know what that. What the hell does that even mean?
People don't realize too, like that those untold stories that are in the background are what make you curious about a character. Like seeing Boba Fett be this first character.
Not only that, it makes the universe feel bigger. Automatically,
like all of this stuff actually exists. Yeah.
Before you ever met them, right? You know that at the end of A New Hope, you knew that there was something more going on with Darth Vader. You didn't really understand it. The Sith weren't well fleshed out. It was not clear what was happening. You knew there was more going on, but you had no idea what it was. But you knew, and you could feel the size of that universe from the things that happened in that movie.
And I also like it's kind of funny.
The Clone Wars. Like the Clone Wars is mentioned in the first few minutes of the movie, and it's like, okay, well, what's that? Oh well, it's just a thing that happened, and like loads of people died, and that's it. That's all. And the funny
thing is, like, by doing that too, that's the way that you can build an expansive universe without having built it yet, and then allow your fans to tell you that this is what they want to see, because like that's how you really get the
space for stuff. And then you go, I'm going to fill in that gap when I'm ready or when you're interested. Right?
Yeah, it's something great to do.
It's a thing. Okay? So the Clone Wars exists. It was a thing. And I'm just going to leave that over there and get on with the story I'm telling now. Thanks.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, Greg and I have done that where we've built out parts of our story where we're like, there's going to be a reason for this. We don't need to even know what it is right now. But if our fans end up being very intrigued by this thing, we'll dive deeper into this rabbit hole. And I think that that's a good way to build out any universe, is like, tell your story, leave pockets of curiosity throughout it. And then basically, if somebody keeps pulling on these, or your top 10 purchasers have asked me this one question 100 times, then maybe, just maybe, we dive a little deeper into that world, because it's like the fact that it starts off in a galaxy far, far away, and it gives you like this little bit of background that leaves so many questions in your mind, but really it's just one main question, which is what the story tells, right? But there's a bunch of other questions. We'll answer, we may answer them, we may not. That's not the point of this story. This is the point of the story. And I think that's the reason why, like, the new Star Wars, not getting into it at all, but the fact that they go like this into 18 plots, and then they finish a different plot, and then you're like, what did that have to do with any of this other stuff? I think that independent comic creators also fall into that, where because they're trying to create these expansive worlds, they forget the story arc they're telling is the only one that matters for this medium.
Right back around to tell a good story first.
Yeah.
First, if you want to be an indie creator, tell a good story. Tell a story that you are going to tell well. Doesn't have to be better than anyone else could. It has to be a story that you are going to tell well. And if you do that, people will give you a chance.
That is a perfect transition into you sharing your story and pulling some stuff up.
Cascade.
Sure. So Cascade is my Avengers movie, and yes, it is a good story. It's a story that's built on several comics that led before. Each major character in here has had at least one comic. Most of them have had 2 or 3, where they've appeared and been, very, very important to the story.
For anyone who doesn't know, share some of the names of these stories, so that if someone wants to.
Absolutely. So there's Lacuna. There is Blue Shift. Both Blue Shift Frenemies and Blue Shift Mind Games. There is Violet Unstoppable. There is Violet Backlash. There is Penumbra Tide. And there is Cascade #1. That's kind of what I call the main path of the story. Now, a couple of people from some of our other comics make cameos. Fauna from Fauna Community. And then, I've got another Fauna comic that's written and drawn, but not released yet, because it's sort of blocked on this, because it happens after this. So, Cascade, though, is, again, it's a good story. It's a story about people. And people who have had to be completely independent. They face down enemies. They face down problems. They've dealt with the supervillains that they run into. They've dealt with the issues that they are. That's Blue Shift there on the screen there. They've dealt with the issues that they have to deal with. They've dealt with the supervillains that they encounter, and now there's something bigger. There's something worse. There's something nastier and scarier than there was before. Cascade. In Cascade Part 1, each of them went in and they tried to punch her and drop buildings on her, and every single thing they did made Cascade get bigger. Bigger and bigger and bigger. Cascade, the villain, hashtag it's complicated. The villain, Cascade, basically turns energy into matter with a significant multiplier.
Villain relationship, complicated.
Very complicated. And the thing is that Penumbra, who had the last comic before this team-up comic, not only does she feel responsible for it, she quickly realizes that she is overfaced and goes to get help. So she ends up being the de facto leader, but she's one of those people who knows that she would do it better on her own. So she's a terrible leader. Because that's what people are like. I have worked with someone recently who believes themselves to be better than everyone else at everything that could possibly be done. So what's even the point in having anyone do something because they always screw it up? That's Penumbra. That's who Penumbra is as a character. Yeah, fine. Just trip. Seriously, I said trip her over. What? Fine. I'll do it because you're all inept, right? That's Penumbra, and you imagine her leading a team. It's not going well, right? So by the end of the first issue, she's like, no. You know what? I'm gonna go do my thing. I'm whatever. You guys are useless. And the other three, one of whom, Blue Shift, the speedster, has a broken leg at this point. They're like, hang on, wasn't she the leader until a moment ago? Like what do we do now? And Cascade number 2 begins with Penumbra following Cascade. Cascade is the one leading this story. Cascade is doing whatever she wants. That nothing they've done has been effective in stopping her for anything she wanted to do. So Penumbra starts following Cascade to find out what she's doing. That's a good idea. She does not involve the team. Yeah, great leadership there. Well done. She finds out some things. Cascade walks into the lake near the city, picks up a device from the bottom of the lake, integrates it into her body, and then walks out of the lake. Well, by this time, the army's turned up, and they're not very happy with, giant robot crushing buildings and things. So they blast her, at which point pieces fall off Cascade and turn into mini, human-sized cascades. Yeah, going really, really well. So, you now have an army of these things. And it's literally just doing whatever it wants. How are you, as a fractured team, there's a wonderful scene that I wrote, and there was a lot of input from my good friend and co-writer Jonathan Lewis in this particular scene, where Penumbra has returned by now to the team and goes, okay, so what's the plan? And all 4 of them shout out a different plan. She just sort of face palms and is like, fine, go do your thing. Do whatever. Do just fine, whatever. And this is the Empire Strikes Back. This is the low point. This comic it's getting worse by the minute. And no matter what we do, we seem to be making things worse. So what do we do to turn this around? And Cascade number 3, which is already underway with the artwork, that's where things turn around. That's where things change. And it changes not because the superheroes are so powerful, so much more powerful. It's not Superman doesn't come in and punch well. In fact, Superman, in a sense, does come in and punch Cascade, and it only makes Cascade bigger. That happened in issue 1. You don't go around punching everything to make it work. You need to work together. You need to put your talent. And in the end, the only way that they are going to win is by pooling their talents. Or is it? Because we come back to Penumbra knows she can solve this problem. And she'll do it better than anyone else. So it's not about the villain. It's not about the heroes per se as superheroes. It's about a team who tried to solve an impossible problem. And it's about team dynamics. It's about people. It's about what happens when you get 4 strong personalities in a room who all have their own agendas, their own way of operating, and there's nobody to lead them.
You should end up pitching this to some business managers to purchase.
It's funny, actually. Before I go on to this, but I do want to say something about this. Before I go on to this, Cascade number 2, the URL where you can reach it is in my thinking board there. I'm sure it'll be in the comments for the podcast as well. Thanks, Greg. But it's funny because some years ago now, I made a movie, a superhero movie in my superhero universe. It's only a short. it's 18 minutes long with as many extra minutes of extra stuff that we did for fun. But I showed it at work because, you know, work had heard I was doing it. In fact, someone from work actually came and was part of the crew. So I showed it at work, and the office manager turned around to me at the end. The head of HR and office manager turned around to me at the end and said, "Oh, I get it. It's a movie about project management."
For real though, like it's funny, like
it was about, like, the whole movie, the whole crux of this movie is, if they had just tried to communicate, tried to see the other side, none of this movie would have happened. But they were both so sure that they were right from the beginning. They were both so sure that they were right about what they were doing.
There's a short story called like it's like Who Ate My Cheese or something like that. I can't remember you know what I'm talking about?
I know the one you're talking about, yes.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Something like that.
It's very short, like I don't know, 50 pages or something, or maybe less. That's the whole thing, and that's the reason I was saying, like, you really should at some point pitch the comic to businesses, because it's like a fun way to get executives or managers to digest the lesson you're trying to teach, which is, hey, if you attack a problem from all different fronts and not unified, this is what it can lead to. And when you might be better than your teammates and think that's the way you resolve it, and then see how that plays out, you realize even that might not be the right path, where it's like learning how to use your individual unique traits collectively, you know, or separately, but unified in your method or
your approach. Yeah, absolutely.
Approach, yeah. And so it's a really cool idea.
Everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. I mean, it's like any writer. I write what I know, and what I see every day is teams with different people working together to a greater or a lesser degree. And
that's
my life. Every day, my job is to make those people work together to a greater degree rather than a lesser degree. Sometimes that means taking a step back and doing nothing. And sometimes it means, guys, come on, you've got to have a conversation here, and you've got to calm yourselves. You know, you don't have all of the information. You're not understanding it. Let me get you that information so that you can actually approach the problem properly. And it varies, right? It varies what the right approach is. The thing that makes my day job so interesting is there is not one answer to every problem. And if anything, the thing that marks, in my opinion, a great project manager, I'd like to believe myself to be in that category, but I leave others to judge, is knowing when not to follow the thing that you were going to do normally. It's knowing when to go, no, this is wrong today for this reason in this specific situation. That's the difference between someone who has a process and can follow it and an excellent project manager who can handle any situation. Because there is no process, there is no approach that works every single time. There is no such thing.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
And that comes back to marketing, it comes back to story writing, it comes back to literally everything. Yeah. I do strongly believe that the reason that I am even slightly successful as a creative is my project management back. It is the things I have learned being a project manager. A, the pragmatism of get it out the door and find out what happens. B, the understanding that when one thing goes wrong, it doesn't mean the end of the world. C, the awareness that it's not a one-size-fits-all answer, and what works for you guys might not work for me because there's a different thing. It may even work. The thing you did last time might have worked 10 times and not work on the 11th because something. Because COVID pandemic or whatever, right? Some kind of external factor that means the thing you've done 100 times doesn't work anymore. Or didn't, even more frustratingly, doesn't work time number 11, but does work time numbers 12 to 18.
Yeah, right? I was going to say, that's definitely a big thing where it's like a really good system is one that also allows for variables to happen. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, you can have this smooth system that runs, but understand that there's got to be points of that system where you check and go, hey, we normally do A through D and this happens, but this time it didn't. Maybe we don't keep going to Z since something happened back here. It's like, let's check this out.
Look at the data, come up with another idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, that gives me now I got 2 panels to put on the what's it called, the expo. So the second one I was just thinking of was basically how to take project management and turn it into comic book management. And I'm trying to remember what the hell the first one was. What was the first one we were talking about?
It was Kickstarters that fail and why they failed.
Yeah, Kickstarters that fail. I'm just writing this down before I forget it. And then what was it? Project management. That's cool. But yeah, that was awesome. Right? This was a very fun podcast. I also like how we started it off strong, just jumping right into it. But yeah, so yeah, we did this. We got it at an hour. It's an hour 5 minutes. So it's not too bad. So before we head off, obviously you have your project. You got the URL down there. But if people want to, talk to you, meet you, hang out with you, whatever, right? Where do you want them to go if you can send them someplace?
Head to sovcomics.com. At the bottom, we've got all our social media. We've got a Discord server where anyone is welcome to join us to chat about the comics, or indeed to try out our role-playing games, which take place in our comic universes. We run a lot of role-playing games. Yeah, I mean, we're on Facebook and Instagram and so on. SOV Comics or Shades of Vengeance. Yeah, those places. Reach out. Check out the Kickstarter. Reach out on Kickstarter messages if that's how you want to reach out. But in case you hadn't noticed, I love talking about being creative. I love talking about the creative process. I love talking about the ways in which you reach a good story, the things that I've observed during my. I think I've been writing comics for 13 years now. So my 13 years writing comics, as an indie creator, the things I've learned, I love meeting other creatives, talking with other creatives. I mean, I also have had a lot of fun today. So once again, thank you for having me back. But I love doing this sort of thing, like just jamming ideas. Just hey, yeah, what about this? What about that? What do you think about this? And just hearing what other people have to say, because at the end of the day, whether I agree or disagree with everything you say, and frankly, I do agree with the vast majority of things you say, it's a slightly different perspective, and that makes you question yours.
Iron sharpens iron.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So once again, thank you very much for having me, and thank you, listeners, for listening to me ramble. But yeah, I mean, presumably I'll be back at some point. You really struggle to get rid of me, so
Yeah.
At the absolute latest, she'll be here for the virtual expo in November.
I hope so.
Awesome. Well.